Hello, this is McD the Beast, and this is McD Sports 4 coming to you today with my college football preseason top 25, the only top 25 that matters. A few things about this top 25. Uh, when I predict games and I use my top 25, I don't use the AP top 25. I'll use the college football playoff top 25 to a bit of a lesser extent at times, but when rating teams, but I use, especially early in the season, I use my top 25, and the reason why is because I watch more college football games than probably about 75% of the voters in the AP pool. So I always go by my top 25. In my opinion, my top 25 is the only one that matters. So this is my preseason top 25 here. For the 2022 college football season, 25 teams. I'll go through it 25 through 1, and then a few teams that got left out that I do want to touch on a little bit that I think could have good seasons. So without further ado, let's get into it. And number 25, I have Minnesota. I think Minnesota should be the favorite to win the Big Ten West, in my opinion. That division, they bring back a lot of players on their team. They are, I think, they are the most experienced team out of the Big Ten West, and you gotta think that PJ Fleck needs to get over the hump. I do think this year he does have the team to do that. They bring back the quarterback. They bring back the offensive coordinator that was there in 2019 as well. So that's also something to keep an eye on as well. I'm high on Minnesota this year. I have them at number 25. Number 24 is Arkansas. Uh, Two things that worry me about Arkansas. I do think they are a top 25 team. That's why they're here at number 24. Is the defensive scheme they run and the amount of time they lose on the defensive side of the ball. I think they only bring back 4 starters, if I'm not mistaken, there at Arkansas on the defensive end of the ball. They run a 3-3-5 defense, which is a good defense. I'm not criticizing the defensive scheme, but when you go up against good teams, and you saw it last year against Georgia, if you cannot stop, you're just gonna have trouble stopping the run with that defensive scheme. And Arkansas saw it last year against Georgia. That does concern me a little bit about Arkansas, especially with not a lot of defensive players coming back. But I do think they are a top 25 team. I have them at number 24. Number 23 is Oregon. Oregon kind of left a bad taste in my mouth at the end of last season. They lost to Utah twice in blowout fashions and absolute beatdowns. And then they went ahead and lost to Oklahoma in the bowl game. They have a new head coach in Dan Lanning. They do have that game against Georgia in week 1. I'll come out and say right now, it actually would not surprise me if Oregon wins that game, but I don't think they will. And the only reason I'm saying that is we said that Ohio State was going to beat Oregon last year, and look what happened. But I'm not that high on Oregon. I've seen Oregon in some top tens in some polls this off season or some of the preseason polls. I just don't see it. I have them at number 23. Number 22 is Wake Forest. Wake Forest they're gonna be pretty good offensively. The question is the defense with Wake Forest. They bring back the quarterback of Sam Hartman. Dave Clarkson I think is a very damn good head coach. And to be honest, their schedule's pretty easy there at Wake Forest, but I think the question is the defense. Can they figure out a defense that can just get some stops? I remember last year on here, they beat Army 70-56. And I sat there and basically came up on here and said, this is how Wake Forest is going to have to win games, just in these shootout type games. If they have to win games like that, I think they could maybe only get 7-8 wins. If they could find a defense, though, that's really what I think it comes down to for Wake Forest. So, number 22, Wake Forest, I do think they are a top 25 team. And then number 21, Michigan State. Mel Tucker's going to live and die by the transfer portal, in my opinion. They lose Kenneth Walker, the running back. They do bring back the quarterback in Payne Foreign. You hope this defense, especially the secondary, gets better. Interesting fact about Michigan State: their secondary was one of, if not the worst, in college football. They do face some teams that are going to want to throw the ball, such as Ohio State does. Also in the Big Ten East, a team that comes to mind, and you could call me a homer in saying this, the Marin Terps. They do want to throw the ball. So I know Michigan State beat them last year, but they gotta get better there. In my opinion, I don't think you're going to replace Kenneth Walker. So we'll see what happens at running back. But I do think they are a top 25 team. I still think they're going to be a pretty damn good team, at least an 8-9 win team at worst, maybe 7-5. But Michigan State number 21. Now to the top 20. Number 20 is Texas. Yeah, I'll bite. Listen, I'll give Texas this. I do think they have the best running back in the country in B.J. Robinson. Uh, if you look at their week 2 game against Alabama, he is the best running back on the field. Matter of fact, at the skill positions, he might be the best skill position player on the field. But you look at Texas, a few things for me. A, I'm not completely sold on the defense. B, we see what Quinn Ewers does. He's never taken a snap before. C, I'm not sold on Steve Sarkisian as a head coach. As a matter of fact, I do think they downgrade from Tom Herman. And so far, the results have proved me correct. I know he's recruited better. I know he got Arch Manning. But we'll see. Texas, I think they have some huge games. I look at the Oklahoma game, especially the Red River Shootout. That's gonna be a huge game for them. So we'll see where Texas is at throughout the season. But number 20, Texas, I do think overall you gotta put them in the top 25. But I'm not willing to really maybe put them past maybe number 18. I have them 20 here. Number 19 is Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin. Um, I look at Lane Kiffin and his squad. To be completely honest, I do think Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss could take a bit of a step back this year. They could be that team in the SEC West that maybe lose a game or two that might be kind of a, well, let me reword that. They could lose a game or two that maybe they should not lose, or maybe they just catch some tough breaks in. I still think they're a top 25 team. I do. Defensively, you hope maybe they get a little bit better. There were some times I thought the defense could have played better throughout the season last year. You look at them offensively, they do bring in Jackson Dart to go ahead and replace Matt Corral. So I do think they'll be fine there. And Lane Kiff is a hell of an offensive mind. So I'm not very concerned about them offensively. It really just comes down to with Ole Miss, I think is can they manage through the schedule, and can this defense stay more consistent for Ole Miss? But I do think they are a top 20 team. I have them at number 19. Number 18 is Kentucky, and Ole Miss and Kentucky kind of go the same way. Kentucky has some prospects, such as Will Levis, that's getting some love for a first-round draft pick in the NFL. I'm not seeing that, him being a first-round draft pick. I just don't see it. Um, they also have Chris Rodriguez, the running back. You look at Kentucky. Mark Stoops, I think, has built an excellent program there. They are probably one of the most physical teams in the SEC, and I do think they are a top 25 team. So I think Kentucky and Ole Miss, I think they play each other in Week 5. That's going to be a big game for both of those teams. I think that's pretty much an even matchup. So number 18, Kentucky. Number 17 is USC. My only issue with USC is defensively, I don't think they're going to be that good. And also on the lines, offensive line, defensive line, I don't think they don't have. I personally don't think the depth is there to really go out and compete for a college football playoff spot. I think they'll be competing for a Pac-12 championship spot, but not a college football playoff spot. I think they will probably have at least 2-3 losses on the schedule, but everything's looking up for USC in my opinion. You look at Lincoln Riley coming in, obviously. Caleb Williams, the quarterback. You also have Mario Williams coming in there as well. So, and Jordan Addison from Pitt. So I think everything's looking up for Pitt, for USC, but I'm not sold they're a top 15 team. So number 17 USC, number 16 Pittsburgh. Um, I'm not that sold on Pittsburgh, to be honest with you. I mean, they do bring in Cleveland Slovis at the quarterback, so I think they'll be fine there. As long as they're fine there, they're not going to replace Jordan Addison. They're just not. But if they can maybe like figure some things out offensively, I do think they will be a top 25 team, which I think they will to a point. They as long as you have quarterback figured out, especially in college football, you're usually good to go for at least making a bowl game most of the time, which Pitt, I do think, does have quarterback figured out. And I think they have a pretty decent one in Cleveland Slovis. Um, but you look at the defense. The defense would be pretty good. You know, Pat Narduzzi will coach his team well. I think they're a top 25 team. So number 16, Pittsburgh. Now the top 15, and I forgot to do the animations for this. Number 15, Oklahoma. Um, if you look at Oklahoma, last year was a bit of a crazy year. You kind of survived a bunch of games, and then you eventually lost to Baylor and Oklahoma State. You look at Oklahoma; they bring in Brent Venables. I like the offensive coordinator hire and Josh Levy. They go ahead and bring in Dylan Gabriel there at quarterback. So they have quarterback figured out. My only question for Oklahoma is they have a first-year head coach, and I do think Brent Venables is going to do a great job at Oklahoma. But they have a first-year head coach, and in my opinion, I do think they could struggle a little bit. I think they're around a top 15 team, so I put them right at 15. Number 14 is Tennessee. I'm high on Tennessee this year. I am. And I know that's kind of bold saying I'm high on Tennessee with what you saw the previous, I would say, damn near 2 decades with Tennessee. But this is what I like about Tennessee. Offensively, I think they'll gold. I think they're going to be really damn good offensively. Year 2 under Josh Heupel, year 2 with this coaching staff, you would think the defense will get better. I think the main problem with Tennessee's defense last year was that they just ran out of gas. They just didn't have the bodies to really go. Well, I shouldn't say bodies. They didn't have the depth to really go out there against some of these better teams in the fourth quarter. I mean, if you remember, they did take Alabama in a really competitive game into the fourth quarter before Alabama just ran away with it. They played Georgia tough for a half. I mean, they beat Kentucky. They beat South Carolina. The only game that was kind of weird was the Florida game, which they lost. But you look at Tennessee, I'm really high on them. I think outside Alabama and Georgia, I think they should be favored in every game if you look at their schedule. So Tennessee, number 14, I'm really high on them. Number 13 is BYU. BYU brings back everybody on defense. I forget if it's 8 or 9 offensive starters. This team gives me vibes of 2014 Mississippi State. If you remember that team with Dak Prescott and Dan Mullen, they rose up to number 1 in the country before losing a close game to Alabama on the road there. I think BYU is going to be really damn good this year. And they if you look at their schedule, I know that they're still independent. They're eventually going to move to the Big 12. They have Baylor, Oregon, and Notre Dame on their schedule. And I believe they have another Pac-12 team or two on their schedule as well. So they're going to have opportunities on their schedule. But I'm really sold on BYU. I think they are a top 15 team. So number 13, BYU. Number 12, Miami. I think Miami made a damn good hire, Mario Cristobal. They got the guy. Hey, they got the guy they wanted, which is kind of rare for Miami. And I think I've said it here on Make These Sports 4, but I do think Manny Diaz got done wrong there at Miami the way he was let go. But I think Mario Cristobal, I think they're going to run through the ACC. They had that tough out conference game on the road against Texas A&M. I think that's going to be a difficult game for them. Even though I definitely give Miami a chance in that, but in my opinion, you look at Miami, I think they run through the ACC. I mean, outside maybe Pitt, and I am kind of high on North Carolina. I do think North Carolina can maybe win 8-9 games, but outside maybe those two teams, I think they have Clemson as well. We'll get into them here in a minute, but they could win a bunch of games in the ACC and find themselves in the ACC championship game very easily. So I like Miami a lot this year. Number 12, Miami. Number 11, NC State. I think NC State, the only question I have about NC State is how much can you buy into Dave Doran? I've been kind of critical of Dave Doran in the past. I'm not completely sold on him, but I do think this is easily the best team he's ever had. They bring back a bunch of starters on this team. I kind of alluded to this with BYU. They kind of give me vibes of that 2014 Mississippi State team with Dak Prescott and Dan Mullen. And I think they could win 10, 11 games. The only game I see them really being a dog in is that Clemson game. So on the road against Clemson, and they beat Clemson last year, so they shouldn't be scared of playing against Clemson like it has been previous years. So number 11 NC State. Now to the top 10. Number 10 Oklahoma State. And I'm going to talk about Oklahoma State and Baylor here. To me, they're one of the same. I think these two teams should be the favorite to win the Big 12. Oklahoma State, yeah, they do lose some talent. They also lose that defensive coordinator that went to Ohio State, which name is escaping me right now. But they bring in Derek Mason. Derek Mason is now the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma State. He was the defensive coordinator at Auburn. You look at Oklahoma State. Gundy's going to win 9-10 games every year. That's what he's going to do. He's going to lose one that he's not supposed to lose. And that game last year was the Iowa State game, where they basically just got a bad spot. I mean, to be completely honest with you, with Oklahoma State, they were a bad spot and a half yard away from being in the college football playoffs, basically. That's basically how close it was for Oklahoma State. Um, so you look, I believe in Mike Gundy. I think Oklahoma State will be at worst competing for the Big 12 championship. So Oklahoma State number 10. Number 9 is Clemson. Clemson, I think, might have the best defense in the country. The question is the offense. They have that game on the national primetime spot Monday night on Labor Day against Georgia Tech. It's technically a neutral site game in Atlanta, but it's really a home game for Georgia Tech. Clemson really needs to have a good showing offensively for me in that game to really buy into them. I do think they are a top 15 team. I'm sold on the defense. In my opinion, I think they have the best front seven in college football, especially that front four. I don't even think it's really that close. Well, maybe Alabama might have something to say about that, but Clemson's right there. I think does have the top front four in college football, but you look at Clemson, they have Notre Dame. They have some tough games. When not so much tough games, but they have losable games on the road against Boston College and Florida State, in my opinion. They also have NC State as well. So it should be. It's going to be interesting to see how they play this year. Remember, they lose both coordinators to head coaching gigs. As I said, Brent Venables went to Oklahoma. Tony Elliott went to Virginia. Um, so it's going to be interesting to see. But to me, they gotta have a good offensive showing against Georgia Tech. That score cannot be 14-8 like it was last year. Number 8's Notre Dame. I'll be honest with you. I think Notre Dame. I think it's going to be. I think they're going to underperform this year. I think they're going to be a bit underwhelming. First year head coach Marcus Freeman, which I do think will work, but I do think it's going to take a year. You look at Marcus Freeman. He's been the head coach for one game against Oklahoma State, and it was in the Fiesta Bowl, which they lost. Big game week 1 against Ohio State. That's going to be a huge spot for him. But I do think Notre Dame overall, if you look at their rosters, pretty much at worst a borderline top 10 team. So number 8, Notre Dame. Number 7 is Baylor. Kind of what I alluded to with Oklahoma State. I think in my opinion, I think Baylor should be the favorites to win the Big 12. You look at Baylor. I think Dave Aranda is building a program there and the program he's building. Once Oklahoma and Texas leaves, I think Baylor is going to be that big brand there in the Big 12, probably with BYU, if you want my guess, and maybe Oklahoma State to a bit of a lesser degree. But I think Baylor is easily a top 10 team. I know some people think they're going to fall back a little bit. I don't see that. I just don't. I don't think they'll miss a beat. And I think they should be favorites to win the Big 12, honestly. Number 7, Baylor. And then number 6, Utah. They should be favorites to win the Pac-12. Utah does have that week 1 game on the road against Florida. I think Utah is going in there and beating them probably by around 14 points, if you want my guess. 14 to 17 points. I think Florida overall is a bit worse than what some people I think want to think. Utah, I think overall the culture there is great. You know that God, I forget Kyle Willingham. You know what he does there. And I think they are going to be probably winning the Pac-12 most likely. I think them, USC, and Oregon are probably your 3 teams you're looking at. I think should be big-time favorites, in my opinion, Utah. And if you look at their schedule, they do have a shot to go undefeated and maybe even be 13-0 after the Pac-12 championship game. So number 6, Utah. Now my top 5. Number 5 is Texas A&M. I am absolutely sold on Texas A&M. Some people are high on them this past season. I was kind of like on the fence with it. I think outside of quarterback, they're 3 deep everywhere. They are. Quarterback is going to be a bit interesting to figure out there. But as long as they get good enough quarterback play, I think they'll be fine. I really do. I think they're easily the second best team in the SEC West, behind Alabama. And I really think they could go 11-1 with a loss to Alabama and possibly make the playoffs. I really do. But we'll see what happens. But number 5, Texas A&M. Number 4, Michigan. Some people think Michigan's going to drop off a little bit. I've seen them a lot around number 7 in some polls. I don't see it. I just don't see it. I know they lose those 2 studs on the defensive line. That's going to be tough to replace. But if you look at their team, I could argue maybe outside of a few positions that there are 3 deep everywhere. You look at Michigan, Jim Harbaugh finally got the monkey off his back being Ohio State. I don't think people should expect, oh, Michigan's going to lose a random game somewhere, or, oh, it's all going to lead up to a big loss against Ohio State. I just don't see that. I know the game's in Columbus. I think Michigan could easily go in there and win that game. I'm not predicting that, but you look at Michigan. I do think that overall they are the 4th best team in the country. I really do. I think the top 3 are obvious. Who should be the top 3? After 4 is after 3 is kind of a drop off, and like basically 4 through like 10, it could be whoever. I really think Michigan's the best team out of that 4 through 10. So I like Michigan at number 4 here. And if you look at their schedule, I think they will be 11 though going up against Ohio State. I don't see them losing a game. I just don't. So yeah, Michigan number 4. Number 3 is Georgia, the defending national champs. They lose a lot on defense. Now, granted, I do think they will reload. But I think the good news for Georgia is that Kirby Smart's a defensive-minded coach, and as I said, I do think they will reload. I think they'll be undefeated. I know there's a few spots on there. You look at Tennessee, that game is in Athens. You look at that South Carolina game. Yeah, it'll be a wild environment, but I think Georgia's going to beat them. But you look at Georgia, I think they are the 3rd best team in the country. They'll get their crack probably against Alabama, maybe Texas A&M in the SEC championship game. So number 3, Georgia. Number 2 is Ohio State. I do think Ohio State should be favored to win the Big Ten despite Michigan winning it last year, because I think Ohio State is going to be a lot better than what they were last year, especially on defense. They bring that defensive coordinator from Oklahoma State, whose name is still escaping my mind. Sorry, Ohio State fans, but you look at Ohio State, wide receiver room might be the best in the country. Defense, I think, will probably be around a top 15 defense, if you want my opinion. I think last year they were a top 25 defense. I think at worst they'll be a top 15 defense. You look at their schedule overall. They do have Notre Dame. They have Michigan at the end of the year. They are on the road against Penn State. Penn State usually tends to play them tough, so you do have that. But you look at Ohio State. I mean, they're going to be favored in every game this season. I think they are, pound to pound, probably the 2nd best team in the country. Number 1 is Alabama. I mean, Nick Saban said last year was a rebuilding year. I mean, I wouldn't make fun of that, but if you're not winning a championship at Alabama, it's considered a disappointment. So I can't completely disagree with his comments. But, I mean, you look at Alabama. I mean, you bring back the quarterback. The wide receiver room's great. The only question I really have about Alabama is that running back. The running back room is a bit weak in my opinion compared to maybe some of these other teams up here, or teams that they could be competing against. don't really have that pound-to-pound running back that they've had, like maybe a Eddie Lacy or a Derrick Henry. They don't really have that, or like a Najee Harris to a bit of a lesser extent. But you look at Alabama. I think they are the best team in the country. They get Texas in the non-conference, and they have to go up against the SEC West, Tennessee, which I think is a top 25 team. I forget. I think they get. Do they get Vanderbilt out of the East? They might get Vandy out of the East. I have to look at that. But you look at Alabama. I think they're the best team in the country. Now there are going to be points where they could slip up. That Tennessee game is a spot. I think that Arkansas game is a spot as well early on in the season. But you look at Alabama, number one in the country. So now that's the top 25. Here are the teams that I did consider but didn't make the cut. I'll go through each of them quickly here. Penn State. I do think Penn State will be a top 25-ish team. I don't think they're going to be as good as maybe they were in mid-October last year. I mean, if you remember, Penn State was a top 5 team in mid-October last year before they lost to Iowa. But they do bring back the quarterback. I think this year's kind of like a year, maybe they're a year away. I personally do think Penn State is a year away. I think 2023 is going to be the year for Penn State. So Penn State, I think, is a team that will be in some top 25s, but and it could possibly be in my top 25 some weeks. But I do think overall I think they're a year away. Iowa. Iowa's consistently an 8-9 win team. They will be in some top 25s just because of the name. But I'm not really sold on Iowa. I mean, I'm sold on the defense. Same thing with Wisconsin. Iowa and Wisconsin kind of go hand in hand. The quarterback situation is god awful. The offense in general, I think, is god awful. Even though I think Wisconsin, if they do what they do running the ball, I do think the running back room is good enough that they could get away with it. And hopefully the O-line is good enough. But Iowa and Wisconsin's offenses are horrible in my opinion, and they're really gonna have to ride on their defenses. But I still think they're at worst 7-5 teams. Florida State in the ACC, I'm high on Florida State this year. I don't think they're necessarily a top 25 team, but I do think they could get to 8-9 wins this year. So Florida State, and then now to the group of 5 teams. UCF and Houston. Houston is going to be in a lot of top 25s this year because a lot of people like putting a group of 5 team in their top 25. I'm just gonna be honest. There's not really that bona fide group of 5 school, and I know UCF and Houston and Cincinnati is the other one that's gonna be in the Big 12 here in a few years. But there's not really that bona fide group of 5 school like last year. Cincinnati and Louisiana were kind of the two. Coastal Carolina to a bit of a lesser degree. And I actually do think Coastal Carolina could be that team this year that could get into that New Year's Six Bowl. But UCF, Houston, Cincinnati, to me are kind of all the same. I guess Houston's the best one out of the 3, it seems like, according to what everybody's saying. But I think one of these 3 teams will, more likely or not, probably end up in a top 25 poll consistently throughout the season once we get into October. And then Air Force, looking at a team not in the American. Air Force brings back a lot of starters this year. It is a deep team. I think they should be favorites to win the Mountain West. They could very easily, if let's say in the American, everybody kind of beats up on each other, and the champions 11-2, and Air Force is sitting there at 13-0. Air Force could easily be that team in the New Year's Six Bowl, representing the group of 5 there out of the Mountain West. I think Air Force, as I said, very deep team. I believe they bring back all 11 starters on offense, if I'm not mistaken. They bring back, I think, 9 on defense. So very deep team there at Air Force. I think they're a team that could easily make a New Year's Six Bowl if things bounce the right way. So that's my top 25. That's the teams I consider. Comment down below. Tell me if you think I maybe missed a team. Tell me your top 25. I always like hearing from you all. Thanks for watching the video. Hit the thumbs up. Please subscribe to your channel. Oh, yeah, one other quick thing. Predictions are going to start probably this Wednesday. I'm going to try to get the SEC predictions are done. I just got to film them. And the Big Ten is just about done. I just got to finish them up. I'm going to try to get the SEC out Wednesday and the Big Ten out Friday. So, stay tuned for that. But thanks for watching the video, and this is McD the Beast signing off.